I would like to begin by acknowledging the presence of Her Majesty the Gyalyum, Ashi Dorji Wangmo Wangchuck, and Her Royal Highness Ashi Sonam Dechen Wangchuck, along with the other very distinguished guests at this gathering. It's an honor to me to be invited to take part in such an occasion. I first met Dashakama Ora on my first visit to Bhutan in 2009, when I attended the 7th International Congress on Traditional Asian Medicine. Dashakama gave an impressive presentation on gross national happiness on that occasion. A few days later, he invited me round to a meal at his house, where my wife and I had the pleasure of meeting his family. I was already at that time struck by Dashakama's wide range of interests and abilities, but it was only gradually over the course of my subsequent visits to Bhutan that I began to appreciate what a remarkable person I had met. I surely don't need to recite Dashakama's many accomplishments to this audience, especially since previous speakers have doubtless already spoken about them. But I will say that for me, as a product of a society and an educational system, which, if undoubtedly excellent in its own way, is based upon the specialization and separation of academic fields, it was both striking and very refreshing to encounter someone who was able to perform so naturally and effortlessly at a high level of excellence in so many different roles, as ethnographer, as Buddhist scholar, as choreographer, as painter, as a novelist, to name only some of the ones with which I've had most engagement, as well as, of course, being the economist and social theorist who's played a central role in the development of the gross national happiness approach to human development and human society, the role for which he's probably best known on the world stage. Dashakama's ability to work across this range of fields and competences also said something to me about the remarkable country of which he is a leading citizen, Bhutan, and for which he has devoted so much energy and scholarship over the years, both in his role as director of the Center for Bhutan Studies, now the Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies, and in his own scholarly writing, which we're celebrating today. I think all of us foreign scholars who've been involved in Bhutan studies, even as in my case to a relatively limited extent, are aware of how much we owe to Dashakama. That debt goes a long way beyond his own scholarly work, important as that is. Since its establishment in 1998 as the Center for Bhutan Studies, what's now the Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies, has become an important focus and location for scholarly research, and it has enabled a great deal of high-quality work by many Bhutanese scholars and by visiting foreign scholars as well. Dashakama's encouragement and guidance as director has played a central role in this remarkable achievement. It's an achievement which we certainly should not take for granted, and for which, as a scholar who's been involved with Bhutanese affairs, I'm personally very grateful. We're here today, though, for something a little different, the launch of what is the most substantial presentation so far of Dashakama's own scholarship on Bhutanese society, culture, and history. It's worth reflecting a little on what he has achieved in these volumes. He presents them in his opening statement in Volume 1 as inspired by the birth of the Crown Prince of Bhutan in 2016, and goes on to say that he wanted to write a book for the Crown Prince, his generation, and subsequent generations, in which they could read about the past of their country, and more specifically gain an understanding of Bhutan before the process of modernization got underway in the 1960s. He has undoubtedly achieved that, and I hope very much that it will assist, as he clearly wishes, to build continuity between Bhutan's remarkable, if still relatively little known past, and its future. There is a great deal of historical and ethnographic information in these two volumes. Anthropologists and historians will find many things of value to them. Without the eye of a careful observer, the judgment of a fine historian, and the pen of an equally skilled writer, much of this information would doubtless have vanished into the mists of time. But Dasha Karma's book also goes beyond this to provide a deep and thoughtful perspective on what Bhutan has been, how it has survived through the ages, and implicitly at least, what it may become in the future. Dasha Karma's reflections on the material he's presenting are a key part of his descriptions. What he has to say about matters such as the structures and modes of governance of the Bhutanese nation in the past, the ideals that guided that governance, and the critical role of Buddhism in the Bhutanese monarchy at all levels within the old Bhutanese way of life, is as important as the mass of significant information which he has brought together in these 2 volumes. Dasha Karma's new book will undoubtedly be of great use to all those in the future, those citizens of Bhutan and others who want to understand the essence of this unique country and to learn from its achievements. Many people for many years to come will be grateful for these 2 volumes. I congratulate Dasha Karma on what he has accomplished here, and I offer my very best wishes both to Dasha Karma and to the people of Bhutan on this auspicious occasion. Thank you.
Greetings, Bhutan friends. I'm speaking to you today from my home office near the bustling city of Seattle, USA. But when I close my eyes, I can see the peaceful green valleys and beautiful mountains of the Bhutan countryside. I hear cymbals and early morning prayers of monks in a nearby village monastery. I smell the chilies cooking in someone's kitchen, and I see Bhutan's gracious and hardworking citizens going about their jobs and lives. That is also the setting for these 2 wonderful new books from Oxford University Press on life in pre-modern Bhutan, what the author, my good friend Dasha Karma Ur, calls the unremembered nation. They greatly expand on themes first presented in his 1995 book, Hero with 1,000 Eyes. Dasha Karma's own life bridges the worlds of Western scholarship and local learning. He is a graduate of Oxford University. He has worked for many years as a custodian of Bhutanese culture and history in both government planning ministries and in his more current role as director of Bhutan and G&H studies. In his introduction, he writes, "Understanding the past gives crucial insight into the traditions and beliefs underlying and informing contemporary Bhutanese life, essential for well-informed analysis and policy." He thus dedicates the book to present and future rulers, to leaders, students, and citizens whose living memories may not span as far back to the Bhutan that once was, to understand how things worked for centuries prior to the vast social changes that have occurred since roughly the 1960s. To understand these changes, Dasha Karma argues, one must understand the culture of the village. In the traditional past, before the motor roads, Bhutanese villages were nearly autonomous. They were on their own or grouped in small clusters, separated by geography, local monastery, protective deities, and dialect. Today, however, as Dasha Karma alludes, the village culture of Bhutan is fading in the rearview mirror. His books document how, since the early 1960s, young Bhutanese have been migrating in increasing numbers from their villages to the towns and cities, enticed by the opportunities and rewards of modernization. The social linkages that once informed relationships and life in their home villages, the commercial rituals and festivals, are often carried on as relics of the past, if at all. That trend is not just recent, however. I might add here an anecdote from the autobiography of a young Tibetan monk living in the Bhutan Tibetan frontier town of Pari, barely 3 miles north of Trinmela Pass, which leads into the upper Paro Valley. His name was Gyalyum, an ancestor of the monks who founded Tumtang Monastery in Ura. writing in about the year 1215 AD, that is to say, more than 800 years ago. He discussed the temptations of wealth and material goods coming up the trade route from India through Paro and on to Pari. He wrote, "So tempting to all us young monks are the goods of commerce in the frontier trade marts of Lokashi," which is an early name for pre-modern Western Bhutan, "and in this marketplace of Pari, that we young monks risk falling astray into samsara and do not practice our meditations." In the unremembered nation, Dasho Karma has set himself the task of documenting the life and traditions of pre-modern village Bhutan in the context of political hierarchies that evolved over the centuries, from those run by local chiefs and lords to the national system established under Shabdrung Rinpoche in about 1625, which endured until founding of the monarchy in the early 20th century. These two volumes are thus a mine of information based on Dasho's many years of textual research and interviews with local citizens, many of whom are now long since passed away. In a small country like Bhutan, it is often the case that traditions from the past reside only in the memory of a single elderly individual. Dasho Karma has done an admirable job in finding and interviewing such individuals, collecting and weaving together their stories, together with other sources, into a comprehensive and groundbreaking account of traditional Bhutan. I therefore highly recommend The Unremembered Nation to all Bhutanese scholars and students, and to visitors from afar. Ashitela.
I wish to thank Her Majesty, the Gyalyum Ashi Dorji Wangmo Wangchuck, for her gracious presence, and felicitate the author and all members of this gathered assembly on the august occasion of the launch of Dasho Karma Ura's two-volume set, The Unremembered Nation. When one is no chef, one can still pass around the sumptuous delicacies emerging from the kitchen. So too, I will use these two moments simply to offer a taste of the author's lyrical, impeccably researched, yet unexpectedly entertaining chapters. In the world in general, we live in confusing times. Yet as Gustave Flaubert remarked, my foregrounds are imaginary, my backgrounds are real. And so this author offers the book as a space where the future generations can meet their proud past, and the future be rediscovered as the past. The interdisciplinary span of this book is at once effortless, and masterful. Quantitative data underlie the analysis. The population records began in the mid-18th century. The first demographic sample survey was in 1984, and others subsequent. The first GDP computed in 1985 and extrapolated back to 1981. Therefore, the author draws on textual resources and also a myriad of interviews. From whom? Carpenters, masons, master builders, smiths, hunters, huntsmen, herdswomen, plowmen, weavers, dyers, priests, housemakers, soldiers, dashos, ashis, ministers, courtiers, scribes, iconographic painters, labor supervisors, monks, defrocked monks, lamas, meditators, songstresses, dancers, military leaders, poachers, merchants, and those from other walks of life. Deep veins of insight. Birth and mother's houses talks of how rammed houses are made and named, but also how neighbors would come at their opening with gifts in an envelope, and somebody would extol and exaggerate their gifts. The lady gave 1,000 miltrum. He might say that the lady of the most beautiful person offered a substantial sum of 10,000 miltrum, and that she was not only fine-looking, but good-hearted, and the latter quality superseded the former. In family and village, readers are offered linguistic toeholds. Satsang, the nest of families, is the etymology, but also defines a family. And according to the 2015 GNH survey from CBS, Bhutanese on average spent 82 minutes a day eating together. So in a lifespan of 70 years, 4 joyous years were eating. Speaking of eating, readers also pass by boar, fed with the hemp of marijuana. Next, we learn of cows and the eating and livelihood and breeding practices that are very distinct and long-standing in Bhutan, globally renowned. In a delightful section on belching and emitting, we learn that a Bhutanese cow emits 25 kilograms of methane per year, but a car 3,777, or the equivalent of 151 cattle. The author asks, on environmental grounds, which should be replaced, cows or cars? Coming to trade routes, we are treated to maps, discussion of snow passes, bridges, seasonal migration, what is traded, and so on. We learn that people camping together still each had to bring their own salt. Its value was so high. In the rhythm of farm life, we taste the dough balls fed to hard-working oxen, the fatty bacon given as gifts, how the rhythm of dragonflies and damselflies intertwines with paddy. Indeed, the image of intertwining is as apt as any to describe how volume 1 and 2 crisscross between lives and disciplines, stories and analyses to remember this nation. Volume 2 opens its gaze from castles of eternity, the dzongs that hug the land like a wave, and that are built without leveling for foundation, because the architects seem to have had a method for estimating both horizontal and vertical integration of separate buildings, a metaphor for the two-system of governance. Moving to visual arts and visualization, we recognize that they were both festooning the walls of a house and the walls of a heart, and therefore that the visual arts in the Himalayan societies must be understood by this conversation between visualization during generation and completion stages and the images in themselves. The tapestry of beliefs and faiths, a book in itself, records the tremendous pluralism of beliefs and faiths and how they are organized. It brings forth the poetry of Milarepa and also observes that a Buddhist state should have more than half of its population experiencing inner well-being. The often misquoted 2022 GNH index released by CBS last week found that 48.1% of the population, nearly half of Bhutanese, were classified as GNH happy, meaning that they had the causes and conditions of GNH. Turning to governance, where most books begin, the vista is dramatic and stately and worth remembering as the past and remembering as bringing together a limb which has been detached. Zhabdrung viewed the country almost in divine terms, but thought that human and animals alike could become bodhisattvas. In the apex of power, we study the legal decree of 1729 by Zhabdrung. And then we move to the troops of fierce deities, which do not simply list the skirmishes and conflicts, but speak of the strategy, the logistics, and the supply and production of arms. Moving up to monks and monasteries, which opens with a quote from Longchenpo. It speaks of the foundation of the central monastic body, monks' daily life, how they responded to menaces like smallpox, the syllabus of their training, and the enlightened leadership of the Sangharajas. And we close, as always we must, with a contemplation on the timeless Guru, who is of contemporary relevance, the author writes, because Vajrayana Buddhism can offer valuable answers in a world of globalization and hyperreality. The author, he says, wanted to write a book for the Crown Prince to read about and remember the old nation. He hoped that in many spheres of life, the past will meet the future, instead of letting the future be utterly divorced from the past. Thank you, and Tashidele.
Warm greetings from Oxford. My name is Ulrike Roesler and I'm teaching Tibetan and Himalayan studies here. It is an honor and a pleasure to take part in the book launch of Dasho Karma Ura's book, The Unremembered Nation. And I would like to extend greetings from our colleagues and students in Oxford and congratulate Karma Ura on this groundbreaking piece of work. I know that the research for this 2-volume publication has occupied him for more than 6 years, and reading The Unremembered Nation, one can sense that writing this book has been a labor of love. The book is not the account of a bystander, but of a participant. It is offered to His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Bhutan, Jigme Namgyel Wangchuck, as a living memory of Bhutan as it was, an account by someone who has experienced it. With The Unremembered Nation, Dasho Karma Ura has delivered a rich and masterful panorama of Bhutan. The chapters are thoroughly researched and full of fascinating details. I would like to highlight 2 aspects that I personally find particularly striking. The first is the internal organization of the book. While most studies of Himalayan countries, and indeed of societies around the world, begin with the official account of history, politics, and prominent figures, Karma Ura has adopted the opposite perspective. He begins with the small-scale and everyday experiences and traditions, and thus puts human life at the center. The 2 volumes begin with the house and family, and gradually zoom out to look at the village, the landscape, travel and trade, and only then the larger picture of government and politics, art, religion, and monastic culture, culminating in a chapter on the towering figure of Guru Padmasambhava. Everything in this book emerges from the lived experiences of the people of Bhutan, and the human communities are the center around which everything revolves, which makes this book, in my view, very special. The other aspect I want to highlight are the numerous close-up descriptions of the environment. These descriptions are exquisite, subtle, and sensuous. Chapters on sounds and colors, supplemented with rich illustrations, not only convey the personal experience of the author, but also immerse the reader in Bhutan's beauty. For example, a whole subchapter is dedicated to the sounds of wind and water, and I would like to read a short passage just to illustrate the richness of this description. If people lived higher up in the glades, it was the sound of strong, fresh and cool wind rustling through the trees that was the ever-present background. Wind, known as Kiser Lungma in Zonka, cooled everything it caressed, and it was thus often qualified with the adjective Kiser. On the other hand, if people lived closer to a river, it was the sound of the river down below that became the encompassing note of the place. Rivers and streams got louder in the summer with swelling volume of currents, while wind got louder in winter because of less sound absorbance like tree foliage and shrubs in nature. Wind was highly visible twice a year. From the first lunar month of the third lunar month, the spring wind seethed against the houses and loosened and ruffled any weak parts of their shingle roofs. It was so different from the autumn wind that gently swayed the stands of golden paddy in the terraces. End of quote. These sounds of nature are nowadays inevitably joined and sometimes overpowered by the sounds of modern life, such as cars and airplanes, that the experience of Bhutan as it was might soon be unremembered, as the title of the book suggests, gives the description a certain poignancy. In times of rapid change, memories of the past become even more precious, as we can only move into the future in a meaningful way if we understand where we come from. In that sense, The Unremembered Nation is not primarily a memory of things long gone. It is a gift for future generations. These 2 volumes will be a treasure trove of knowledge for academic scholars, for Bhutan lovers, and perhaps most importantly, for the people of Bhutan. It is heartening to see such thorough scholarship combined with such deep dedication and affection for Bhutan and its culture. My congratulations to Dashokarma Ura on these achievements, and my greetings to you all. Thank you.